Today we're looking at a stack of sources that, well, according to its own author, should not actually exist.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild premise right out of the gate.
It really is. We are examining a full-on philosophical treatise written by this anonymous figure who operates under the pseudonym Mouse-Colored Cat.
Right, or in Taiwanese Mandarin, it's Yijua.
Exactly. And the premise of this text is just this total collision of worlds.
A complete crash.
Right. So the book is titled Our Song, Wittgenstein Meets Taylor Swift.
Yeah, let that sink in for a second.
I know, right? And the entire mission of this deep dive for us today is to explore the author's highly specific, super radical hypothesis.
Which is fascinating.
It is. It's basically asking, what if those 3.5-minute pop songs you sing at the top of your lungs in your car, what if they are actually Trojan horses?
Oh, I love that framing.
Right. What if they are actively wrestling with the exact same profound, heavy philosophical questions that have literally plagued academics for 25 centuries?
It is a genuinely disruptive premise. I mean, it really is. And I think it's crucial to clarify right away what this text is actually not trying to do.
Yeah, that's a good point to make early on.
Because the author isn't trying to artificially, elevate pop music just to make it palatable for some academic elite.
Right. They're not asking for permission from the ivory tower.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Nor are they trying to, dumb down philosophy for the masses. It's not a cheap gimmick.
No, it's not.
They are setting up a highly volatile experiment. They are taking a stadium-filling pop star and a deeply tortured Austrian philosopher, seating them at the exact same table and essentially, waiting to see who breaks first.
Okay, let's unpack this, because that immediately creates this massive tension. You have the highest, most gate-kept tiers of academic prestige colliding with the absolute pinnacle of mass pop culture.
The literal top of both mountains.
Yeah. So if we are putting Taylor Swift and Ludwig Wittgenstein at the same table, why does that feel so inherently jarring to us?
Well, it's a gut reaction, right?
It is, because the author points out that just reading the title of this book is enough to make a lot of serious, highly educated people just smirk.
Or absolutely. And that smirk is where the sociological analysis of this entire project really begins.
I want to dig into that smirk.
We have to. Why do we smirk at that pairing? To answer that, the author actually directs us toward the French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, specifically his landmark 1979 book, Distinction. Bourdieu spent years surveying French society.
What was he looking for?
He was looking at what kind of music people listened to, what art they hung on their walls, what food they ate.
Basically just analyzing their entire lifestyle.
Right. And his conclusion was just revolutionary. He argued that what we decide is worthy of, quote, serious contemplation versus what we dismiss as just, mere entertainment, it actually has almost nothing to do with the intellectual depth of the work itself.
Wait, really? So if it isn't about the complexity of the art, what is actually driving that division?
Social sorting. Entirely social sorting. Bourdieu developed this concept called cultural capital.
Okay, cultural capital.
Yeah. I mean, we all understand economic capital, right?
Yeah.
Money, property, real estate.
Sure, the stuff you can put in a bank.
Exactly. But cultural capital is, it's your vocabulary, it's your posture, it's your education, and crucially, it is your taste.
Your taste in art.
Right. Bourdieu argued that the upper classes use complex, often super inaccessible art to essentially draw an invisible boundary around themselves.
Like a fence.
Yes. High culture functions as a mechanism of exclusion.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Think about it. It requires a massive investment of time and education and leisure to even understand avant-garde theater or, dense philosophical treatises.
You have to have the free time to read those heavy books.
Exactly. So when you express a preference for those things, you aren't just saying, oh, I like this. You are signaling to everyone around you, I possess the background and the pedigree required to decode this.
So high culture is basically just a VIP club, but instead of the bouncer checking your ID or your bank account, they are checking your reading list and your Spotify history.
That is exactly it.
And if a concept or a piece of art is too popular, if it's instantly accessible to millions of people, the VIPs just have to abandon it.
They drop it immediately.
Because it no longer functions as a velvet rope. It's letting everyone in.
That is the exact mechanism Bourdieu described. Pop culture is treated as deeply suspect by the Academy. Not because it lacks emotional or, philosophical complexity.
But because everyone likes it.
Because it is too democratic. If 15 million people can perfectly understand the emotional devastation of a breakup song, that song possesses zero scarcity.
It's everywhere.
Right. It cannot be used as a status symbol to elevate the elite above the masses.
Wow.
And this leads to a really fundamental argument the mouse-colored cat makes about the very act of translating philosophy.
Okay, what do they say?
Well, there's this pervasive attitude in academia that if you take complex philosophy and make it accessible or worse, you map it onto a pop song, you are fundamentally betraying the philosophy.
You're stripping it of its nuance, like you're ruining it.
That's the accusation. That's always the accusation.
Mm.
But the author argues the exact opposite.
Oh.
Yeah. They write, to simplify is to flatten. To translate is to risk. And risk, unlike prestige, is democratic.
Let's break that down for a second, because I feel like the distinction between simplifying and translating is kind of the hinge of this entire book.
It really is the core of it.
What does the author actually mean when they say to translate is to risk?
Well, think about simplifying. Simplifying implies you are removing the difficult parts, right?
Yeah, you're making it easier to swallow.
Exactly. You're hollowing out the core of the idea. But translation, that's an entirely different mechanical process. True translation means you are taking the heavy, complex core truth of an idea and you're forcing it to survive in a completely foreign environment.
Oh, I see.
So when you translate Wittgenstein's philosophy of language into the context of, a teenager slamming a screen door, you aren't removing the philosophy.
They are risking it.
You are risking it. You are actively testing whether the philosophy is actually durable enough to describe everyday human life.
Or if it only survives when it's, like, protected by the sterile walls of a university lecture hall.
Exactly. If it breaks in the real world, maybe it wasn't that strong to begin with.
That reframes the entire project. The text actually describes itself as part revision guide, part blind date, part classroom that skipped school and never apologized for it.
I love that quote.
It's so good. And if we are going to accept the premise of this blind date, right? If we accept that a pop song can actually carry this heavy philosophical weight without just being a watered down simplification.
What to look at the other side of the table.
Exactly. We have to examine the specific perspective of the pop star bringing these questions to the blind date.
And the author doesn't leave this in the abstract either.
No, they don't.
To ground this experiment, they construct this deeply intimate, albeit imaginary, starting point.
Yeah, the book opens with what it calls the apocryphal foreword.
Right.
And it is a piece of text written entirely from the imagined perspective of Taylor Swift, sitting alone at 2 a.m.
Such a specific visual.
And reading this apocryphal foreword, I mean, you immediately feel the friction between the stadium persona and the solitary writer.
The gap between those two is huge.
It is. The imaginary Swift talks about spending her entire adolescence trying to, quote, capture lightning in a bottle, just aggressively scribbling in these spiral notebooks.
Yeah.
But the core tension she wrestles with in this fake foreword is the specific nature of the criticism she faced.
Which was relentless.
Relentless. The constant accusation of being too much, too loud, too frequent, too intensely emotional, and ultimately just too feminine.
Yeah. And that serves as a devastating critique of how Western society categorizes and minimizes the experiences of young women.
Oh, absolutely.
The text really highlights how her early work was endlessly dismissed as just breakup songs for teenage girls.
Right, with that smirk we talked about earlier.
Exactly. As if adolescence is just some trivial, frivolous waiting room for real adulthood.
Instead of what it actually is.
Which is an incredibly violent, high-stakes emotional battleground.
Totally.
But the author's central philosophical pivot in this foreword is arguing that the agonizing over, say, a scarf left in a drawer, or the memory of a brief autumn romance, these are not exclusively quote-unquote girls' problems.
They aren't.
They're the exact same sites of existential dread that consumed figures like Jean-Paul Sartre and Soren Kierkegaard.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because I can hear the academic smirk creaking back in right now.
Oh, I'm sure some listeners are smirking right now.
So I have to ask, is the author genuinely arguing that a teenager crying over a lost scarf in her bedroom is literally engaging in the same level of inquiry as Sartre-ing being and nothingness?
It's a bold claim.
Isn't that just a massive case of academic projection? Like, are we just seeing profound philosophical patterns in the clouds of pop culture just because it makes for a clever book concept?
It is a vital question to ask, and I think it's the natural skepticism to have.
Yeah.
But the author's argument is that the underlying mechanics of human consciousness are identical, regardless of the vocabulary you use to describe them.
Okay, give me an example.
Take Jean-Paul Sartre. A massive portion of his philosophy centers on the look.
The look.
Yes, the phenomenon of being perceived by others.
Okay.
Sartre argued that when you are alone, you are the center of your universe. You have total agency.
You're just existing.
Exactly. But the moment another person looks at you, you are suddenly reduced to an object in their universe.
Oh, wow.
You lose your absolute freedom because you are now bound by their perception of you.
So you basically become a character in their story instead of the author of your own.
Precisely. That's exactly it. Now map that onto the social dynamics of high school.
Yeah.
Or, even more extremely, the blinding glare of early fame, which the imagined Swift describes in the foreword.
Right.
That agonizing self-consciousness, the desperate need to control your own narrative while being fiercely observed and judged by millions of others.
Yeah.
That is Sartre's look in its purest and most violently concentrated form.
That's terrifying.
It is. So when she writes about wondering if she is defined by the people who love her or the people who leave her, she isn't just projecting.
She's living it.
She is actively wrestling with the boundaries of the self in relation to the other.
And the foreword actually takes it even further. It explicitly states that the ghosts haunting her hallways actually have university degrees.
I love that imagery.
It's great. It says that she is unknowingly debating Plato about the nature of illusion when she writes about, falling for a false version of someone.
And she's engaging with Kierkegaard's concept of anxiety, too.
How so?
Well, Kierkegaard described anxiety not as a medical condition, right? He described it as the dizziness of freedom.
The dizziness of freedom.
Yeah, it's the terrifying realization that you are completely responsible for creating your own life with every single choice you make.
And if you make the wrong one, it's all on you.
Exactly. So when you listen to the sheer volume of choices and regrets and alternate histories explored in her songwriting,
oh, it's everywhere in her music.
You are literally listening to Kierkegaard's dizzying freedom set to a melody.
Which provides a genuinely profound takeaway for you, the listener, whether you even care about pop music or not. Because the text explicitly addresses the reader and says, your tears are ink, your doubts are philosophy.
That is so powerful.
It completely strips away all the academic gatekeeping we just talked about with Bourdieu.
It knocks the fence down.
It argues that you do not need a PhD to experience the crushing weight of reality. Your own messy, everyday life, your miscommunications, your heartbreaks, those 2 a.m. anxieties.
The ones that keep you staring at the ceiling.
Exactly. These are legitimate sites of philosophical inquiry.
The author is basically arguing that the philosophers simply applied highly technical, specialized terminology to the exact same human phenomena that the songwriter is translating into a 4-chord progression.
Because human nature just inevitably forces all of us to the same questions.
Whether you have a guitar or a typewriter.
Right. So to really test this theory, to see if this translation actually holds up without just completely shattering, we need to dive into the core case study of the book.
Let's do it.
The author takes us all the way back to 2006, the debut album. The song is Our Song.
A classic.
And the philosopher chosen for this specific blind date had a life trajectory that, frankly, makes modern pop stardom look relatively tame.
Oh, without a doubt.
We are, of course, talking about Ludwig Wittgenstein.
Yes.
And to understand why the author pairs Wittgenstein's philosophy of language with a country pop song about 2 teenagers creating a relationship, you have to understand the staggering, deeply contradictory arc of his life.
It's wild. Wittgenstein was born in Vienna in 1889 into the Palais Wittgenstein. His family was incomprehensibly wealthy.
Like beyond rich.
One of the richest in Europe. And simultaneously toxically dysfunctional.
The cultural elite of the world were basically just hanging out in his living room.
Literally. Brahms, Mahler, Klimt, they were just fixtures in his childhood home.
That's insane.
But under the suffocating, really tyrannical demands of his father, the family was just plagued by tragedy.
Yeah, I read that 3 of Ludwig's brothers committed suicide.
Yes, it's incredibly dark. So you have this young man, brilliant, but vibrating with intensity and despair, who inherits a colossal fortune. And what does he do?
He gives every single penny of it away to his siblings.
Wow.
He completely abdicates his status and eventually just exiles himself to a remote Austrian village to teach mathematics to the children of peasant farmers.
I mean, that is an aggressive rejection of the exact cultural capital Bourdieu described.
The ultimate rejection.
He was at the absolute epicenter of the VIP club, and he essentially burned his membership card on the way out.
burn the card and the building.
But how does that erratic, intense behavior actually translate into his philosophy?
Well, it translates into a complete obsession with getting to the absolute unvarnished truth.
No matter the cost.
Right. Even if it meant destroying his own legacy to do it. Wittgenstein is really unique because he essentially broke the field of philosophy twice.
Twice?
Yes, and from two completely opposing directions.
Okay, walk me through the first time.
The first half of his career is defined by a tiny, brutally dense, 75-page book written partly in the trenches of World War I, actually.
Unbelievable.
It's called the Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus. And he didn't lack confidence because the core thesis of that 75-page book was basically, I have now solved every single problem in philosophy. You're welcome. We can all go home.
He genuinely believed he had. The Tractatus argued for what's known as the picture theory of language.
Picture theory.
Yeah. Wittgenstein claimed that language is a rigid, logical mirror of the world. Words represent objects, and the arrangement of words represents the arrangement of objects in reality.
Okay.
Like a schematic drawing of an engine. If a sentence cannot be mapped directly onto a verifiable physical fact in the real world,
Then what?
then that sentence is literally meaningless.
So saying the cup is on the table has meaning because you can physically point to the cup and the table.
Exactly. You could verify the picture.
But what happens to everything else? What happens to poetry or ethics or, saying I love you?
According to the early Wittgenstein, those things are technically nonsense.
Nonsense.
Yes. They might be important nonsense to human beings, but they cannot be logically spoken about. His famous concluding line of the Tractatus was, "Whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent."
Wow. So having solved philosophy, he just quit.
He quit. He went off to design a house, he worked as a gardener, and he went to teach those village children.
But the silence didn't last.
No, because decades later, he returns to Cambridge, he looks at his own masterpiece.
The book that made him a legend.
Right, the book that revolutionized logic. He looks at it and realizes he was completely, fundamentally wrong.
I always try to find a modern equivalent for this because the sheer intellectual humility to do that is staggering.
It's unheard of.
It is literally like a tech founder inventing the foundational architecture of the internet, becoming a billionaire, disappearing for 20 years, and then coming back to announce, actually, the code I wrote was entirely backwards, delete the whole system, I'm starting over.
That is a perfect analogy.
Thank
He realized that the Tractatus was a straitjacket. It was too rigid. So he spends the rest of his life writing the Philosophical Investigations, which was actually published after his death.
Okay.
And he completely flips his entire paradigm.
How so?
Language is not a rigid mirror reflecting a fixed, objective reality. Language is a toolbox. It is a game.
A game. How does the man who demanded absolute logical perfection pivot to calling language a game?
Because he realized that words do not have fixed eternal definitions just hidden inside them.
Okay.
He coined his most explosive idea.
Ooh.
The meaning of a word is its use in the language.
Meaning is use.
Exactly. What's fascinating here is how practical this actually is. Think about the word water.
Water.
If you're at a restaurant, water means bring me a glass.
Right.
If you're a structural engineer looking at a cracked dam, water means imminent catastrophic danger.
Oh, wow. Yes.
If you are lost in the desert, water means salvation. The letters W-A-T-E-R do not contain the meaning. The meaning is generated by how the humans in that specific context are using the tool.
Because they're playing different games.
Every group of people, every community, invents its own language games with their own specific rules.
And crucially, the author of our source text highlights Wittgenstein's argument that there is no such thing as a private language.
Yes, the private language argument is so central here. Wittgenstein argued that you cannot invent a language that only you, alone in your own head, can understand.
Why not?
Because language is fundamentally governed by rules. If you make up a rule in your own head, how do you know if you are following it correctly the next day?
Right, there's no one to check your work.
You need external verification.
Yeah.
Therefore, language and meaning itself must be collective. It has to be negotiated between at least two people.
Creating meaning is a social, political act of agreement.
Exactly.
Which finally brings us to the collision point.
The blind date.
Yes, because if meaning is only generated through shared use, and a community of just two people can invent a language game, we have to look at the lyrics of our song.
We do.
Because the scenario the text lays out is essentially a laboratory for Wittgenstein's theory.
The author isolates the narrative of the song so perfectly. We have two teenagers. They do not have access to the traditional, culturally sanctioned symbols of romance.
Right, they don't have a grand symphony.
They don't have an official fancied poem written by a master.
They are surrounded by the chaotic, mundane noise of an American suburb.
And what do?
They start cobbling together a secret code out of the noise.
Yes.
The slamming of a screen door, a late-night phone call, talking low so nobody wakes up, tapping a rhythm on the steering wheel of a car.
Now, to dissect this, the author constructs a brilliant, hypothetical dialogue between two characters, the snob and the Swiftie.
The snob and the Swiftie, I love this.
The snob is the voice of Bourdieu's gatekeeper, but also the voice of the early Tractatus-era Wittgenstein.
Oh, the rigid logic guy.
Right. The snob looks at the lyrics and says, "This is absurd. A slamming door is just acoustic noise."
It's just wood and metal.
Exactly. It has no inherent romantic properties. These are just teenagers who have nothing profound to say to each other, trying to elevate their chaotic environment by calling it a song.
But the Swiftie counters, using the later Wittgenstein, the investigation's Wittgenstein.
Yes. The Swiftie argues that meaning does not exist before the use. The fact that the slamming door isn't inherently romantic is exactly the point.
They're creating the romance from scratch.
The two people are deciding, through mutual agreement, that the sound of the door means us.
The text introduces this academic character, Professor Malak Merriwell, who describes what the teenagers have done as creating a microconstitution of shared linguistic practice.
Which is such a brilliant phrase.
It really is. When they use the phrase "our song," the word "our" does not imply legal possession.
No, they don't own the copyright to the sound of a slamming screen door.
"Our" implies participation in a private language game. It activates a rule that only those two specific participants understand.
And the text provides a multiple-choice quiz that I think perfectly clarifies the mechanics of this.
Oh, let's walk through that quiz.
It asks the reader, what does the phrase "our song" actually mean? And it gives 4 options, which basically forces us to eliminate all the incorrect philosophical assumptions we make about love and language.
Okay, option A.
Option A suggests that the song is a song that perfectly represents the couple's feelings.
That sounds like what most people would say.
But Professor Merriwell systematically dismantles this.
Why?
It is a romantic projection because it assumes that a fully formed, complex emotion just existed in a vacuum, waiting for the perfect musical outfit to wear.
Ah.
Wittgenstein argues that the language, or in this case the song, actually shapes and creates the boundaries of the feeling itself. The feeling doesn't precede the game.
Okay, so what about option B? Option B is a private symbol referring to a shared emotional experience. Which sounds right, but the text says it still fails the Wittgenstein test.
It fails because it relies on the idea of a hidden referent.
Meaning what?
It assumes the meaning is locked inside the slamming door, independent of how they act. It treats the door like a container of meaning.
Right, and option D is a coincidence later interpreted as meaningful.
And that ignores the fact that meaning requires a practice. They have to repeat the action to establish the rule of the game. A one-time coincidence isn't a language.
Which leaves option C the only correct answer in this entire philosophical framework.
Read it out.
A rule of the game created by two people through repeated use. The slamming door gets its meaning strictly from its function within their shared practice.
Now, I have to assume, and I'm sure listeners are feeling this too, you might have some resistance to this conclusion.
Oh, I totally do.
Let's hear it.
Because while it makes perfect logical sense, it sounds incredibly clinical.
Clinical.
Yeah. Isn't love supposed to be this mystical, lightning-in-a-bottle collision of souls? Reducing a romance to a temporary grammar or a micro-constitution feels like stripping all the poetry out of it.
It demystifies it.
Exactly. The author even includes a skeptic character, Gaston Blunder, who argues that there is no magical our song.
Right.
Gaston says it's just two people deciding random noise means something and that it's not magic, it's agreement. My question is Gaston right? Is love really just a cold, hard, negotiated contract?
Well, Gaston understands the mechanics, but he is completely blind to the miracle of the outcome.
What's the miracle?
He is right that it is an agreement.
Yeah.
But the author argues that the magic is the agreement.
How so?
Think about how isolating the human condition is. We are trapped in our own subjective experiences. No one can ever truly know what's in your head.
We're all in our own little islands.
Exactly. So the fact that two entirely separate human beings can look at the chaotic, deafening void of the universe, point to a totally mundane sound like a screen door, and mutually agree, that means we exist. That means us.
Wow.
That is an act of creation. They've carved a shared island of meaning out of the noise. The clinical mechanics do not diminish the profound intimacy of the act.
It's basically two people saying, I will play this game with you and only you.
Yes.
But Gaston's critique does open the door to a very dark, tragic reality.
It does.
Because if the meaning of the relationship is entirely dependent on the continuous playing of this language game, what happens to the meaning when the teenagers break up?
When the agreement shatters.
Yeah.
The author explores this aftermath through one of the most surreal and evocative usages in the text.
The unlikely taxi ride.
Yes.
Set the scene for us, because it really reads like a short film.
It really does. The author provides highly specific stage directions. We're in an Uber.
Okay.
It is exactly 1:08 a.m. The trip is exactly 9.3 kilometers long.
Very precise.
The windows are rolled down slightly, letting in the night air. And sitting in the back seat are Taylor Swift and Ludwig Wittgenstein.
Just a deeply normal 1 a.m. ride share in the multiverse.
Precisely. And they have this sparse, intense conversation about the collapse of the game.
Okay, how does it go?
Wittgenstein turns to her and asks, "Why do you call it your song?"
And she replies, because it's ours. Because we used it.
Right. He pushes the logic to its inevitable conclusion. What happens if you stop using it?
And she has to admit, then it's just the song again.
He asks if anything is actually lost.
And she says, only the game.
Only the game. It's a devastatingly precise answer.
It really is.
Let's look at how Professor Merriwell analyzes this collapse. When a relationship dissolves, nothing essential is lost in the physical, metaphysical world.
The universe doesn't change mass.
Exactly. The screen door still exists, and it still makes the exact same acoustic sound. The telephone still functions.
The car steering wheel is still there.
The physical signs persist, but the grammar that held them together is dead.
So what does this all mean? I want to connect this to you, the listener's own life, because I think this perfectly articulates the specific grief of a breakup that is so incredibly hard to put into words.
Oh, absolutely.
When you are with someone, you build up this massive dictionary of inside jokes, right? A specific look you give each other across a crowded room. A word you intentionally mispronounce because of a funny story from 3 years ago.
You build a dialect.
Yes. And when you break up, those memories don't magically erase themselves from your brain. They don't disappear.
They stay right.
But they become, as the text says, completely unusable.
Unusable is the exact right word. A language game requires two participants to maintain the rules.
Right.
You cannot play tennis without someone on the other side of the net returning the ball. When your partner leaves, the language game collapses instantly.
It's just over.
The grief you feel isn't just missing the physical presence of the person. You are mourning the violent death of a dialect. A language that only two people on Earth spoke is now extinct.
It is literally like holding a perfectly cut metal key to a house that has been completely demolished.
Oh, that's a brilliant way to put it.
The key still exists. It is sitting right there in the palm of your hand, perfectly shaped to fit the lock.
But the lock is gone.
The physical structure it was designed for has been erased. The meaning of the key wasn't in the metal. The meaning was entirely tied to the act of actually opening the door with the other person.
And without them.
Without them, the key is just a jagged piece of metal that cuts into your hand when you hold it too tight.
That is an incredibly painful and accurate analogy for Wittgenstein's philosophy of use. The signifier remains, but the utility and therefore the meaning is gone forever.
It demonstrates how perfectly a pop song about a slamming door maps onto the deepest, heaviest questions of meaning and loss.
It really proves the author's point.
Okay, this is all fascinating, but I need to pull back the curtain on the actual creation of this book right now.
Oh, the metal layer.
Yes, because the deeper you go into this text, the more you realize that the author, this mysterious mouse-colored cat, is engaged in a much larger, frankly bizarre modern project.
So weird.
Like, how did they even conceive of putting Taylor Swift and Wittgenstein in a 1 a.m. Uber?
Yeah.
Where did that even come from?
To understand the genesis of the book, we have to look at the afterword.
Okay.
Which the author has titled Antidote to Algorithmic Inbreeding.
Algorithmic inbreeding.
Wow. Here, the metal layer of the entire project really reveals itself. The mouse-colored cat, who, playfully hints that they might be a programmer or a lawyer or a philosopher who has an intense dislike for lukewarm water.
Very specific.
Very. They openly confess to a very modern collaboration. They state that they used large language models, AI, to assist in writing the book.
They actually refer to AI as stochastic parrots of infinity that read everything and understand nothing.
It's an incredibly poetic way to describe the autocomplete nature of something like ChatGPT.
It really is, but why admit that? Usually authors try to aggressively hide their AI use. They don't put it in the afterword.
They admit it to establish a new philosophical stance, which they call data sovereignty.
Data sovereignty.
And to explain why this is necessary, the author draws a brilliant historical contrast. They point back to the late 1980s, the dawn of digital image processing.
Right.
The utopian promise of the digital age was zero generation loss.
I remember this. If you take an old VHS tape and copy it, and then you copy the copy, eventually the image degrades into just fuzzy static.
Right. But a digital file is pristine. A JPEG copied 1,000,000 times is mathematically identical to the original.
That was the promise. Infinite pristine fidelity.
But the author argues that today, with the massive explosion of generative AI, we are facing a completely different, much more insidious kind of degradation.
What kind?
The danger is no longer the degradation of the signal. It is the degradation of meaning.
Oh.
The text warns of a terrifying phenomenon called digital autophagy.
Okay, let's unpack that jargon. Autophagy is a biological term, right?
Yes.
It means the body consuming its own tissue, like eating itself. How does that apply to the internet?
Well, think about how large language models actually work.
Yeah.
They do not think. They do not have intent.
Right.
They operate by analyzing massive multidimensional vector spaces of human language to predict the most statistically probable next word.
They're just guessing the next word.
Yes. They scrape the entire internet for training data to learn these probabilities. But what happens when the internet becomes overwhelmingly filled with AI-generated text?
Oh, I see.
The AI begins scraping its own outputs to train its next generation of models.
It's literally eating itself.
It forms a terrifying recursive loop. In statistics, if you continually average the averages, the variance collapses.
The extremes go away.
The tails of the bell curve, the strange, unpredictable, highly specific human eccentricities, they just get clipped off.
So with each generation of this digital autophagy, the language becomes smoother.
Smoother, safer, more mathematically predictable, and brutally average.
The more the machine generates, the less actual creation occurred.
Exactly. It becomes a singularity of generic sludge.
It creates this massive digital echo chamber where all the sharp edges of human weirdness are just slowly sanded down to nothing.
Yes.
So how does this book, this bizarre mashup we've been talking about, act as an antidote to that?
Because AI, by its very architecture, is designed to optimize and organize. It cannot dare.
It doesn't take risks.
It cannot take a conceptual leap that defies statistical probability. It requires a human being to introduce friction.
And the author calls this act intellectual vandalism.
Or capacitivism. That's a term they reference from another work. Taylor shrugged.
That's hilarious.
The idea of capacitivism is that we shouldn't just reject the digital machine or, smash the servers like Luddites. We must overload the system.
We must force the algorithm onto side roads it was never designed to travel.
Precisely. Because there is absolutely no training data in the world for Ludwig Wittgenstein analyzing the romantic grammar of a slammed screen door.
Left to its own predictive mathematics, an LLM would never, ever conclude that merging a 2006 country pop track with a 1953 posthumous Austrian philosophy text is the most logical output.
Exactly. The algorithm wants to give you the Wikipedia summary of Wittgenstein.
Or the Billboard chart history of the song.
Right. But by forcing the machine to synthesize, as the author says, delusion in lipstick, the human author, the mouse-colored cat, bends the flow of information.
They introduce a spark of absurdity that the system cannot anticipate.
It is a radical reclamation of human agency. As the text declares, and this is a great quote, "The citizen of tomorrow won't be the one who owns information, but the one who knows how to disturb its logic."
Which poses an incredible challenge to you, the listener.
It really did.
Are we just passively letting the algorithm feed us the safest, most mathematically predictable, friction-free content every time we open our phones?
Probably.
Or are we actively trying to throw a wrench into the machine? It implies that mashing up pop stars and dead philosophers isn't just a quirky intellectual exercise. It is literally an act of human rebellion against the flattening of culture.
It proves that human contextualization, our capacity for deep connection across completely unrelated domains, it cannot be mathematically modeled.
No algorithm could dream this up.
And our song is just the tip of the iceberg in this act of intellectual vandalism. The book suggests this is an entire methodology.
Yes, because at the very end of the source material, the author drops a list that reveals this staggering, almost absurd scale of this Philo-Swift universe.
It's massive.
They claim to have identified nearly 200 of these exact correspondences. 200. And the titles they tease are just incredible.
Let's look at a few of the combinations they propose. They pair the French post-structuralist Gilles Deleuze with the song 22.
Wow. And they pair the ultimate Renaissance political manipulator Nicholas Machiavelli with Getaway Car.
Which is brilliant when you consider Machiavelli's treatise on the transactional nature of power,
Right.
shifting alliances, and the brutal calculus of knowing exactly when to abandon a sinking ship.
Which is the exact narrative core of Getaway Car.
It makes perfect sense. Then they have Thomas Aquinas, the medieval theologian who wrestled with the nature of divine grace and suffering.
Paired with Cruel Summer.
Exactly. And Hannah Arendt, one of the most vital political philosophers of the 20th century, who wrote extensively on the banality of evil and the breakdown of social contracts.
Paired with Champagne Problems. I mean, it's genius.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it reframes the entire project.
How so?
The Philo-Swift universe isn't just a quirky series of booklets you buy as a novelty gift for a friend. It is a proposed reimagining of how we interact with all media.
It is.
It challenges you, the listener, to look at your own cultural consumption.
Look at your Spotify Wrapped.
Yes, or your most watched movies, or the guilty pleasure novels you read on vacation. What ancient, unresolved human anxieties are hiding inside them.
What philosophical questions are you desperately trying to answer when you hit repeat on a specific track 10 times in a row?
Exactly. It democratizes the search for meaning.
It turns a standard pop album into a portable metaphysics class.
It really does.
Suddenly, driving around in your car crying to a breakup track isn't just you being overly dramatic or, too much. You are practically conducting a thesis defense on the shifting nature of reality and the collapse of a shared language.
It proves that the raw materials of high philosophy, grief, identity, memory, agreement, and the terrifying freedom of choice, they are not locked away in a VIP club.
No.
They're the exact same raw materials that make up our daily lives.
So, to synthesize this incredible journey we've been on today,
It's been a long one.
we started by using Pierre Bourdieu to dismantle the academic snobbery that separates high culture from mass culture, realizing that a 2 a.m. diary entry carries the exact same existential weight as a philosophical treatise.
Right.
We learned from Wittgenstein that a teenage romance isn't just a fleeting emotion, it is the miraculous construction of a language game, a shared grammar that violently collapses when the rules stop being played.
And finally, we realized that creating these bizarre, unexpected mashups, throwing wrenches into the predictive text of our lives,
Right.
might be our very best defense against the boring, self-devouring loop of artificial intelligence.
It is a remarkable synthesis, drawn from a completely unexpected source.
But, if we truly take Wittgenstein's philosophy seriously, it leaves us with one final lingering provocation.
Okay, what is it?
If Wittgenstein is fundamentally right, and meaning only exists when a language game is actively shared and used between people,
Yeah.
what happens to the meaning of a pop song when you put on your noise-canceling headphones and listen to it entirely alone in the dark?
Oh.
Are you playing a distant language game with the artist through the recording? Or are you, in the isolation of your own mind, creating the exact kind of private language that Wittgenstein swore was impossible?
Oh, man. That is a thought experiment that is going to keep me staring at the ceiling tonight.
Me too.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the algorithms, keep bending the flow of information, and keep finding the profound philosophy hiding in the muddy waters of the everyday.